Everybody, this is Ulmer here. Here to show you something that I think you're going to find very interesting. And it's really how to triple your profits when you're doing flips. So most people that are real estate investors, and I assume if you're watching this you are one of them, really know that there are two types of primary real estate investing. Would be flipping, of course, and the other would be wholesaling. Never been a fan of wholesaling for a lot of reasons. I think you leave too much money on the table, but I know people that make their living on it, and that's fantastic. As far as flipping, I have flipped literally hundreds of homes, probably in excess of 1,000, done over 1,500 deals in my 21-year career, so I know how to flip, and there's nothing wrong with flips. Yes, you're putting up capital, and you are either promising debt, putting your own debt up, putting yourself on the line for the risk, but I'm not here to poke holes in flipping. In fact, it's the opposite. I'm going to show you how, with my strategy, you're able to actually triple, in some cases now, not every case, but in some cases, triple the amount of money that you'll walk with when it comes to a traditional or true flip. So just last week, we had some joint venture partners of ours up from another state, and I won't name names, of course, but their traditional model or their business model is flipping deals. And when I showed them the math I'm going to show you, and this particular group was very sophisticated, very savvy, have been flipping homes for upwards of 30 years, literally blew their mind. And I guess I was a little surprised by that, but it made me realize that it's probably a piece of information or a strategy or some math that's worth sharing. So anyway, I'm going to go through the transaction here, kind of give you the numbers that they gave me, and I'm going to show you how I tweaked their numbers to quite literally triple their profit. And all I would tell you is this, is there's, again, nothing wrong with flipping, but with all the TV shows out there teaching every Tom, Dick, and Harry how to pick up a hammer and flip a house because it's just a piece of cake, right? And of course the answer is wrong. It's not a piece of cake. It does have risk and it does take some know-how. But if you are one of those folks that want to get into real estate, we really encourage you to pay close attention here, because I think what I'm going to show you is going to be a good eye-opener. So let me just give you the simple math here. So the folks that were up here last week, they bought a home, actually I believe it was in, well, I don't remember the city, I think it was in Orlando, but needless to say they paid $115,000 for it. The home, when it appraised, would appraise for about $210,000. So they ended up putting about $25,000 into the rehab, and they had about $7,000 in closing costs. So their total basis for the home, I believe, was around $147,000. So let me put $147,000 here. All right, and they wanted to get a quick sale. So even though they had an appraisal at $210,000, they ended up selling it at $200,000. And they walked with about $180,000 was their net number after they paid seller concessions for closing costs and other factors that it takes, the cost to sell the home. Ultimately ended up netting $180,000 and walked with $33,000. Hey, on a surface level, that's a good deal. It was a nice profit. I think it took them about 4 to 6 months to do it. Wasn't the quickest turnaround time, but it wasn't awful. And ultimately, you walk with $33,000 on a basis of about $147,000. Not a bad ROI, and ultimately not a bad deal. Now, one of the things that I have never met a flipper yet that ever considers or takes into consideration or factors in the short-term capital gain. Anytime you're flipping a home under 12 months, you're going to be subject to a short-term capital gain. In most cases, you're looking at about a 35% tax rate. So if you put that in your math, that's going to skew your profit. Now, taxes and death are certain, so there's nothing you can do about it. However, there is a way through this strategy that you're able to minimize your capital gain, and that is by converting from a short-term to a long-term. So surface level, good deal. No complaints, $33,000, they were happy, and I'm sure they would do it again. Now, take the same scenario and plug it into our system, our formula here. So in this case, we paid $115,000. Now, when you're dealing with a picky buyer and it's a true flip, your rehab needs to be impeccable. Now, not that we want to chintz on the rehab when we're doing my strategy, but in many cases, you're able to get away with not doing quite as much. So for the sake of the example, I took $10,000 less and added only a $15,000 rehab cost. But for the sake of the example, I'm actually going to change that. I'm going to change that because I think people out there are going to probably poke holes and say, oh, you just want to chintz on the rehab, so you're only going to do $10,000 less, and that's not true. Let's say we actually did the same amount of rehab, so we have the same amount, the same home at the end of the day, which was spectacular. I saw pictures. So let's change that back to $25,000, which is going to ultimately skew our number down here. And then they had closing costs of $7,000 as well, and it's going to take our base back to $147,000. Okay. Now remember, they had a $210,000 appraisal, and that was a valid number, but they wanted to get a quick sale, so they priced it right at $200,000, and they walked with $180,000, and they succeeded. So the reality is if it appraised at $210,000 today, and we're willing to do what we are calling a delayed flip through our ABLE system here, you are going to actually be able to increase the price from 200 all the way up to 219.9 because it really doesn't have to appraise for a period of time. And in this case, we're going to use a 12-month example. So you will get 219.9. I have no doubts about that. And these folks didn't disagree a bit because of the beauty of the home, the area, the location, and most importantly, the appraisal. So you now have a 219.9 sale price. In this case, we would not look at anything less than $20,000 as far as a down payment is concerned. And that's about a 10%. And in our world, I got to tell you guys, that is the standard for us. We are typically looking for 10%. Will we take more? Of course we will. Have we worked with less? Yes, we have. But when people probe us and press us for what our benchmark is for down payments, 10% is a pretty consistent rule of thumb. So in this scenario, you are going to be working with this delayed flip. So you're going to be selling it to a buyer who's going to be looking for a short window of time, a stepping stone, a bridge, a platform to their permanent financing. And I'm going to get into that in just a second here. So we're going to sell it for $219.9, and we're going to also have a $20,000 down payment. Now, in our system here, you will get paid when you close the deal. You know, the old buy a house, get a check type scenario, there's validity to that. In fact, my good friend Jay Connor is a guy that does a lot of those, and there's a lot of merit to it, by the way. So you have a $5,000 management fee right off the bat because even though you have a private lender or you're putting the money up yourself, which would be a little bit of a distinction in this particular scenario, you always want to charge yourself a management fee. You've got to find the home, you've got to negotiate it. By the way, you don't just put one contract out and get one home. Typically it takes a lot of houses to find the one that you're looking for. Furthermore, you've got to rehab. Contractors, who loves working with contractors, right? Missed deadlines, shortages, overages, missed cut corners, excuse me. So overseeing a rehab is not rocket science, but it does take time and energy. So you got to get paid for that. You've got to pay yourself. And so in our formula, we always want to insert a $5,000 management fee. And yes, that does come off the top, but that's cash to you at the time that you close the deal. And in this case, the money that was borrowed, and again, I'm giving you a particular example from one of our partners, they borrowed 8%. So they have a private lender, not a hard money lender, and that's a big distinction. Doing flips, and certainly doing a delayed flip, will be very tough if you have hard money. It's too expensive. Now, if that was your only choice, your only option, I suspect that you probably could make this work, but for the sake of the example, we're going to use 8% as the rate of interest. I would also tell you, I would be very comfortable if you were paying 10%. Could you pay 12%? Probably, but now you're really getting a little bit on the high side and arguably closer to the hard money cost. But in this case, it was about an 8% interest rate. It was an interest-only payment that would simply accrue, simple interest, and they would not have any sort of principal that was reduced with their particular loan. So at an 8% interest, we factored the payment of roughly $850, I think was what he told me it was. Plus you've got your taxes and insurance. We're thinking about $200 a month, give or take, based on the price point of the home, etc. And that might even be a little thin now that I'm thinking about it. I'm almost wondering if we shouldn't put another $100 in there because I think T&I is probably going to be about $300 a month. So let's take that up to $1,150 a month as far as what your total debt service is. Now, with a home that's worth $210 to $220, looking at a $1,500 to $1,600 a month payment is a very realistic number. By the way, the correlating mortgage payment on a value home like this is going to fall somewhere in the $1,500 to $1,700 range. So, and that would include, of course, your taxes and your insurance. So, in this case, we've got a payment. I put $1,500, and I think that's probably low, by the way. However, it's somewhere in that range. If you take $1,500 and you have a payment that's somewhere in the $1,050 to $1,150 range, for simple math, I did $6,000 here, but because I added 100, let's just, for the sake of this, Dan, let's just take it to 5,000. Poking holes in my own formula already. Actually, I just want to make sure that anyone out there watching this isn't trying to poke holes in the math, because the math is real. I will tell you, these are approximate numbers, but for the most part, you're going to find these are fairly accurate. So in this case, let's just say your payment is going to net you from your investor to the person that's making payments to your buyer. You're going to make about $500 a month in positive cash flow. Now, let's do the math on our system here, and then I'm going to go through the highlights because I think that'll probably tie it together. So you've got a $5,000 management fee. You're going to get $20,000 up front from the deposit, very standard, by the way. And you're going to have, let's just say, $5,000 in positive cash flow, which would take you, so you've got about $30,000 in cash once you've bought it, rehabbed it, and then sold it. So you have $30,000 that you're going to recognize up front, the $5,000 and the $20,000, and then the cash flow will come over the course of the term. Now remember, if someone puts $20,000 down on a $219.9 or $220 sale price, they have a balance due still of $200. So their payments to you do not reduce the balance owed to you in almost every case. You can negotiate that in some instances, and we do, by the way. We are known in some cases to give monthly credits for some of the payments that come in, but it's usually only a small percentage. For the sake of the example, there's no credit given, and I would encourage you to stick to that, of course. So they still owe you $200 even though they've made payments to you for 12 months, okay? So if you have a basis of $147, remember I tweaked the numbers here, and you also add $5,000 because remember, you took your management fee up front and that will come off the top. Now, if you can negotiate that with your private lender where that's just your fee and the split will come off of the $5,000 after it's been taken, that's fantastic. If you have to take the $5,000 off the top, I'm okay with that too. So for the sake of the math, let's say that you actually had $152 as far as your basis, right? $147 plus your $5,000 management fee takes you to $152 basis. Now again, I could argue that we wouldn't want to put 25 grand in the rehab and I would have a real strong case, but anybody that's skeptical, I'm going to go ahead and do the same exact first class pristine rehab. 25 grand done the right way gets you a really long way and get you a beautiful, beautiful rehab. So in this case, if you take 200,000, which is the balance owed to you, and you knock off 152, which is your basis, that leaves you a balance of 48, okay? Now, you've already made 30 up front. Now you're going to make another 48 in the back end. So again, now my math is already screwed up. Man, 2 times, Dan, I'm screwing my math up. So you have 48 and 30. Now you're looking at about 78,000. So right off the bat, you have taken a 33, double it would be 66, triple would be 99. With my math here and adding this 10,000, I'm a little bit shy of the triple, although I would have to argue that you're probably going to be closer to right around $90,000, give or take, if you didn't do the full-scale rehab. So that would probably be the one caveat within my example that would skew the numbers. So, but if you have done rehabs before and you understand our program, you understand that most folks with a $15,000 rehab on a beautiful home are going to be acceptable to take you where you want to get as far as the sale is concerned. So let me point the highlights of the deal out and what's paramount to making these work and happen, okay? Number one, our term is going to be 12 months and 1 day. So we're looking for a buyer who has fairly decent credit. That would bar anyone that had a recent bankruptcy, foreclosure, short sale, or deed in lieu of foreclosure, because that requires typically a 3-year window of seasoning before they can get another mortgage. So you're looking for someone that has decent credentials from the outset. So in this case, we're looking for 12 months and 1 day. What is the difference between a short-term and a long-term capital gain? It's the time. If the home has gone more than 12 months, in this case we're going to use 12 months and 1 day, you're going to take your tax bracket from capital gain from 35 down to about 15 to 20, depending on your tax bracket. And I would tell you that when you want to factor in your bottom line profit, you quite literally just cut your capital gain in half. That's huge, by the way. I don't want to just jump over that. That's a very big deal. Again, short-term versus long-term capital gain. In this instance, you can charge a higher price because of the fact that you're not requiring an appraisal today. You're basically locking a buyer into a price point today that won't be reflected for 12 months and 1 day. So if it's 210 off the bat, you'll have no problem getting 219.9. And I can tell you that most folks that are buying on terms don't have a leveraged position that they can come in and negotiate with you. They'll make offers, there's no question, and you may concede a bit, but in most cases, we bring in list price because of the fact that we're offering terms. And you will find that to be true with the same when you do it. Higher price, and of course, I put typically here with less rehab. And again, I'm going to leave the numbers alone, but I'm going to tell you, you won't need to put 25 grand into the home. The management fee is imperative. You got to pay yourself. Believe me, I've done enough deals where I've split the profits, or I've had an investor, or some scenario where I'm doing all the work and I'm doing it without getting any money up front. So inserting a management fee is very standard, it's very normal, it's very acceptable, and you won't get pushback on that. If you do, then you need to push back yourself, or maybe you're dealing with the wrong investor. You have to get paid for your time. It's not easy to find the deals always, and it's not easy always overseeing the rehab. So inserting a $5,000 management fee right up front is a very normal and very standard thing to do. Of course, you're going to recognize a cash deposit, and if you have a private loan, a private investor that is getting an interest-only payment, that $20,000 goes right in your pocket. And by the way, if our basis is $147 plus a $5,000 management fee, we have a total base of $152. If the house appraises at $210 and we have a $220 contract, pretty conservative loan to value, by the way. I'm very, very comfortable with the investor being protected. Of course, they'll have a first and only mortgage. They'll be on the insurance policy. They will Obviously, you have a note and will be collateralized sufficiently with a conservative loan to value, which is very important. And again, don't forget, with a good rate of return, or excuse me, good interest rate, 8% here, even if you bumped it up to 10%, at a $1,500 to $1,700 a month payment, you're going to walk with some cash flow, anywhere from $500, maybe a little less, a little more. I think that's a pretty safe number that you'll generate about $5,000 every year you have this in positive cash flow, which is all money in your pocket, right? And then don't forget about the back end equity. Part of the beauty in this scenario is that after 1 year worth of payments, they still owe you the same balance that they started with. They sold it, they bought it for $220, or have a price of $220. They put $20,000 down, so you have a balance of $200. That $200 doesn't change. So even after paying you for a year, they still owe you $200. So you have a very, very sweet back-end equity spread. And some additional points that are of interest here, in most cases, you have a less picky buyer. You start dealing with these traditional folks, nothing wrong with that, but they're picky, they're persnickety, they want perfection. I get it, by the way, they're pains in the butt if you want to call the truth, right? So you're dealing with a much less picky buyer when you're dealing with a terms type scenario. You also typically have a quicker sale. Now, could this sit on the market for months and months? It could. However, you have a magnificent home, fully rehabbed in a great area, and you are one of the only folks, or a few folks, that are going to be offering the ability to buy it without having to walk into a bank and qualify today. So typically, that offer in itself is going to get you a quicker sale. By the way, no appraisal issues. When you flip a house, Mr. Appraiser, you pay $115 for it, and you're selling it for $200 4 months later. Now, how's that work? And by the way, appraisers today, as I record this, are very conservative. Not to say you can't get it done, but in many cases, running into appraisal issues can be a problem. And I didn't even put down here potential inspection issues. That picky buyer wants to pick the house apart and look for ways that they can pay you less, and sometimes they can do that through an inspection. And in our scenario, we warranty the mechanicals for 30 days, but our buyers are really buying it as is, and they're fully responsible for any sort of upkeep and the additional repairs or maintenance that they would, the home would require. So you're not landlording here, by the way. You have no requirement for any repairs after 30 days. We have a very thorough due diligence that we undertake when it comes to our buyers. And part of my teaser here is I'm not going to tell you all about our back-end structure, because that, by the way, is going to be one of the keys. And I won't have enough time to give all that to you in this. I'll give it to you in a subsequent video. But the due diligence that we undertake ensures that we have a dynamite buyer in hand. Because when you're doing these scenarios, there's people that would argue you want to take the house back and do it again. I don't have a problem with that. It's not my style. I don't know that it's the style I ever want to take. I want my folks to succeed. I want to have a win-win. And so we want to set them up for success and make sure that we ultimately can get the home sold and cashed out and recognize our back-end profit. Due diligence is very, very important in that scenario. In fact, it's paramount to finding the right buyer. And if I told you all we undertook, you'd be very impressed, because we're qualifying every buyer just like a traditional bank would when they qualify their traditional borrowers. We just understand that they're probably not going to qualify today. We're looking for why they can't qualify and what the steps are to get to the point where they can qualify. We have a third-party escrow management company that will actually debit their account every month, they being the buyer, and deposit it directly in our account. So we don't have a collection process here. We're not a collection agency, don't want to be one, so we'll automate the payments. And in most cases, we mandate a mortgage readiness program. And again, I don't have time to unpack what all that entails, but by mandating this as part of our contract, and it's a very nominal fee every month, by the way, they pretty much ensure, because they're holding these folks' hands every single month, that they are going to get them to the financing table. So some of these components to our back-end structure are very, very important and very key to seeing this through. Again, if these numbers are going to work, the buyer has to be qualified with a bank within about a 12-month and 1-day window. So you can avoid your short-term capital gain, but the only way you recognize your profit is if they actually get their loan. So we want to ensure that. So let me just tell you real quickly here, the keys to this formula, by the way, are pretty simple. Number one, the biggest mistake I've seen other investors make, they don't structure their financing the right way. They go out and they find a private investor, not a hard, a private, and they get 6 months, or they get a year, or they get 18 months, or the investor wants a real short window of time, or the lender, excuse me, so they say, okay, well, I need to get the money and I'll agree to 12 months or some term therein. And when they don't sell it or something happens, now all of a sudden they got a problem with their investor. You got to structure your money the right way up front. Get yourself 2 years, 3 years, or some term thereof in case things don't go perfect. Structure the money the right way. And the other part, which is simple, to many of you watching say, well, that's pretty elementary. You got to do this in the right area. If you want to do this in lower price point homes, the chance of your buyer financing decreases exponentially. This works on middle of the road, middle class America, folks that have good jobs, good down payments, understand the program or the platform that we're offering them, and ultimately understand that this is a purchase, not just a rental or a lease to own. They're actually buying the home. So if you don't do it in the right area, i.e. lower price point homes, war zones, not even counting in this, but just lower price homes, this probably isn't going to work as well. And again, the back end system, the back end structure. One of the key distinctions of our ABLE system is how we have refined and polished this back end system. It's not earth shattering, it's not rocket science, but when I will go through, and I'll do that in a subsequent video, what makes our back end system and our back end structure so powerful, it's some of these components here: the proper due diligence, mandating this mortgage readiness program, walking them through the program, setting them up for success from day one, which all comes through the right qualifying with the right buyer. But when you do it the right way, and let me make sure I'm very clear, if this knucklehead can do it, anybody can do it. It's not that difficult, but it takes experience and practice and probably just the right training is maybe the best way to say it. I've made a lot of mistakes in my time, a lot of mistakes. I still make them every day. As long as I'm learning from them, that's what we're striving for. But we like to tell about the mistakes we make. We like to tell about the lessons we've learned, because the hardest lessons have come through making the mistakes. So anyway, as a whole, this is a way, by basically taking your traditional flip, beautiful scenario, nice little profit, and without fudging the numbers, in fact, I'm probably over on one side a little too conservative with my numbers, this is a way for you to take that profit margin and really triple it in most cases, again, with the right rehab, factoring in the short-term versus the long-term capital gain, executing the system and the strategy with the right buyer in the right area, with the money and the financing lined up the right way to begin with. It's a beautiful thing, and it's not as if you're going broke during the beginning because you just put 25 grand in your pocket, another 5 grand to 6 grand over the course of the 1 year, and at the time that they're ready to go finance, 12 months and 1 day later, you've got a nice back end profit here, about 50,000 more coming, just from structuring it the right way. So I will tell you more in a back end, the back end structure, the back end system, in a subsequent video. Not here to sell you anything. We do have some training programs coming up. I'm sure we'll put that on the screen at the very end here, but I just want to share with you another strategy that really can maximize the return on your investment when you do it the right way. I'll see you very soon. Thank you.